Hi everybody, this is Tom at Harborside Marine and Yacht Sales. We did a video last week about the basics of anchoring, and today we're going to do one on a little bit more advanced anchoring in close quarters. Unfortunately today, Connecticut is reverted to its normal winter weather, so we're going to be doing class inside today. So, when you're anchoring in tight quarters, that means you're going to have to use two anchors. And so I'm going to talk a little about setting and releasing anchors, as well as the actual process of anchoring in close quarters with two anchors. So, typically you'd have this situation in a really narrow harbor, or a tidal estuary, or a river. And so this is what this upper area represents. This lower area is representing what it's all going to look like when it's set up. So, you're coming in with your boat, coming up to where you want to anchor, say right here with my anchor drawn there. And so you drop it, and you put out an appropriate amount of scope. So say, if we're in 10 feet of water with 7-to-1 for rope, you'd use 70 feet of line. So you lower it out and be patient. Just, drop it, let the current carry you back, let it sit for a minute, and keep an eye on shore. See if you have a reference point on shore to see if you're dragging. If you don't think you're dragging, what you're going to want to do is what's called set it, which means put your boat in reverse just at idle, and that'll help really bury the anchor into the bottom. So that's your first anchor. To set your second or your stern anchor, which is going to keep you from swinging, what you want to do is put out double you put out more scope. So if you put out 70 feet at first, you would put out 140 feet, which would bring you back here, like this. And this is where you're going to drop your second anchor. So, same process as the first. You drop your anchor right here. And with your stern anchor, what you're going to want to do is attach what's called a trip line and a buoy. So what that does is a couple of things. Is if you have the tagline and the buoy, it shows to all the other boats in the harbor that you have a second anchor out, so they don't run over it. Also, when it comes time to pull the anchor out, it gives you another line to pull on to help disconnect the anchor from the bottom. So you drop your anchor, put out your 70 feet of line, and then what you do is you haul back in your bow line, which brings you into the middle here, so that you have 70 and 70. So the benefit of this, like I mentioned earlier, is that in a close quarters area like this, where if you only had a single anchor, you'd swing a full circle and end up on shore. With two anchors, you're only going to move side to side like this. So if you have the tide coming in this way, you'll be hanging on this anchor. At slack water, you may float around a little bit, but you're not going to go far. And then when the tide turns, you'll be hauling off of your stern anchor. One thing I did forget to mention in my first video is that if you're using a all-chain rode when you're anchoring, you're going to want to use a snubber line. Which is basically a 6-foot nylon braided line, because it's nice and stretchy, with a chain hook on one end and a loop on the other end. And what that does is you put the hook on the chain and put the loop on one of your cleats, and that takes the load off of your windlass, because you don't want to have direct load on your windlass, and it also helps absorb some of the shock load in the chain, because obviously chain doesn't stretch. So let's talk about when it comes time to haul the anchors back out. You basically just reverse the process. You're going to put out more bow line and drift back to your stern anchor and try to lift it out. Now if you can't lift it out with just your rode, that's where the tagline comes in. And you can grab onto this and pull vertically up on it, and that'll help pop it out of the mud. Obviously before you bring the boat back on the anchor back on the boat, you're going to want to try to get as much mud off as you can. So once this anchor is pulled, you slide back up here, come until you're nearly vertical on top of your bow anchor, and use your windlass to break that anchor loose. Another good trick to do, especially if you have a windlass, is haul the anchor up till just the anchor is still in the water, and you can set off and use the forward motion of the boat to actually clean all the mud off your anchor, and then once it's clean, you haul it the rest of the way back in. So that's about it for close quarters anchoring for today. One thing I did fail to mention in my first video is some other resources. If you're not already involved, and especially if you're a new boater, I'd recommend getting a hold of your local power squadron. They're a fantastic resource, it's also a community. It's somebody you can talk to about boats that their eyes don't glaze over when you talk about boats. They do lots of fantastic courses and group get-togethers, so you have a bit more of a community of boating. So I think that's about it for today. We're going to do our next course is going to be for anchoring in a storm, and then in the spring when we actually have a boat in the water, we're going to go out and do all of this in real life so you can see absolutely everything. I think that's about it for today. I'm Tom, I work for Harborside, and I will see you out on the water.